The guns may be quieter than they were a few weeks ago, but the Middle East is still far from peace. That was the message Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered this week when he declared that the war against Iran is not over. His remarks came at a moment when diplomats are trying to hold together a fragile ceasefire, while military forces across the region remain on high alert. For many observers, Netanyahu's statement was more than a warning. It was a reminder that the deeper struggle between Israel and Iran continues, even if the fighting has slowed. The question now is simple. Is the region moving toward peace, or merely taking a pause before the next round of conflict? The war between Israel, the United States, and Iran has already reshaped the Middle East. What began as a direct confrontation quickly expanded into a regional crisis involving Lebanon, the Gulf states, vital shipping routes, and global energy markets. Even today, signs of instability remain everywhere. Iranian missile and drone attacks recently targeted Kuwait and Bahrain. Kuwait reported casualties and damage at its international airport. Gulf countries condemned the attacks, calling them a dangerous escalation. At the same time, the United States carried out military actions against Iranian positions, while diplomatic talks continued behind the scenes. The result is a region caught between war and diplomacy. Speaking about the conflict, Netanyahu argued that Iran has been significantly weakened. According to him, the military campaign achieved important objectives and reduced Tehran's ability to threaten Israel and its allies. However, he made it clear that Israel does not consider the confrontation finished. His comments suggest that Israeli leaders believe the current situation is only one phase of a much longer struggle. Netanyahu also emphasized his close communication with US President Donald Trump. According to the Israeli leader, the two speak frequently and coordinate closely, even when disagreements arise. "We sometimes have tactical disagreements," Netanyahu said, but added that both sides eventually find a way to resolve them. That statement is important because recent reports revealed tensions between Washington and Jerusalem over how the conflict should be managed. President Trump has been sending mixed but carefully balanced messages. On one hand, he continues to express optimism about negotiations with Iran. He recently stated that talks are going very well and suggested that an agreement could be possible in the near future. On the other hand, he has repeatedly warned that military options remain available if diplomacy fails. Trump appears determined to avoid another major war. Political realities matter. Many Americans are weary of long military conflicts in the Middle East. A new large-scale campaign against Iran would carry significant political and economic risks. This creates a delicate balancing act. Washington wants to maintain pressure on Tehran while also preventing the conflict from spiraling out of control. One of the biggest concerns today is Lebanon. Despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah continues. Israeli airstrikes and Hezbollah attacks have persisted even as negotiators try to establish a more lasting ceasefire. The human cost has been severe. According to Lebanese health authorities, more than 3,500 people have been killed since major fighting resumed in March. Thousands more have been injured, while many families have been forced to leave their homes. For Netanyahu, Hezbollah remains one of the most immediate security threats facing Israel. For Trump, however, a wider war in Lebanon could undermine broader negotiations with Iran. This difference explains why tensions have occasionally emerged between Washington and Jerusalem. The two allies share many objectives, but they do not always agree on how quickly military force should be used. The deeper issue is that none of the core disagreements have disappeared. Iran's regional influence remains a major concern for Israel. Iran continues to support allied groups across the Middle East, including Hezbollah and Lebanon. Meanwhile, Tehran argues that it is acting in self-defense and has repeatedly warned that any future attack will trigger retaliation. Iranian officials have maintained that contact with the United States has not been completely cut off. However, they also admit that negotiations have produced little concrete progress so far. This means diplomacy is still alive, but it remains fragile. The consequences extend far beyond the battlefield. Every escalation affects oil markets, shipping routes, and investor confidence. Recent tensions pushed oil prices higher as traders worried about disruptions to energy supplies. The Strait of Hormuz remains a particular concern because a large portion of the world's oil passes through this narrow waterway. When conflict threatens shipping in the Gulf, the effects are felt far beyond the Middle East. Higher energy costs eventually impact consumers, businesses, and governments around the world. That is one reason why global powers continue pushing for negotiations despite repeated setbacks. Today, the Middle East stands at a critical moment. Diplomats are working to preserve ceasefires. Military commanders remain prepared for further confrontation. Political leaders are trying to show strength while avoiding a larger regional war. Netanyahu's statement reflects this reality. From Israel's perspective, the conflict with Iran is not simply about recent battles. It is part of a broader struggle over security, influence, and the future balance of power in the Middle East. For Iran, the challenge is resisting pressure while protecting its strategic position. For the United States, the goal is to prevent another major war while maintaining leverage in negotiations. These objectives often overlap, but they also create tensions that make a lasting settlement difficult.